Hello and welcome, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about the topic X-linked polymorphism. The main objectives of today's lecture are to know the basics of X-linked polymorphism, to discuss the X-linked recessive inheritance, to discuss about the X-linked disorders in females, to understand X-linked dominant inheritance, to discuss about the X-linked dominant lethals, to discuss about the X-linked genetic disorders, and finally to discuss about the cause of the inheritance of X-linked recessive conditions. The key points of the lecture are: in humans and other mammals, biological sex is determined by a pair of XY in males and XX in females. Genes on the X chromosomes are said to be X-linked genes having distinctive inheritance patterns because they are present in different numbers in females like XX and in males as XY. X-linked human genetic disorders are much more common in males than in females due to the X-linked inheritance pattern. Female carriers have a 50% chance of passing on a changed gene. If a son inherits a changed gene or mutated gene from his mother, then he will be affected by the condition. If a daughter, on the other hand, inherits a changed gene, she will be a carrier like her mother. Dear students, let's start the details of the lecture with the introduction. Common X-linked genetic polymorphisms are expected to alter cellular responses affecting males and females differently through sex-linked inheritance patterns as well as X chromosome. It has also been proposed that inherent X-linked genetic polymorphisms may be contributing factors in causing sex-related differences in cellular phenotypes and response variabilities. The male Y chromosome carries only a few genes predominantly involved in sex determination with only limited immunomodulatory effects. By contrast, the X chromosome is rich in immune modulatory genes and its regulation is grossly different between the sexes. Males carry one X chromosome passed on from the mother, whereas females carry two X chromosomes, one inherited from each parent. Due to the sex-linked inheritance pattern, males with X-linked variant alleles are overrepresented in the population. In human beings, most of the chromosomes come in pairs. The two chromosomes of a homologous pair contain the same basic information, that is the same genes in the same order, but may carry different versions of those genes. A human male has two, the X and the Y chromosome. Unlike the 44, that is non-sex chromosomes or autosomes, the X and Y don't carry the same genes and are not considered homologous. Instead of an X and a Y, a human female has two X chromosomes. These X chromosomes do form a bona fide homologous pair. Because sex chromosomes don't always come in homologous pairs, the genes they carry show unique, distinctive patterns of inheritance. The X chromosome contains 867 identified genes. Most of these genes are responsible for the development of tissues like bone, neural, blood, hepatic, renal, retina, ears, ear, cardiac, skin, and teeth tissues. There are at least 533 disorders due to the involvement of the genes on the X chromosome. A trait or disorder determined by a gene on the X chromosome demonstrates X-linked inheritance. In 1961, Mary Lyon proposed that in the cells of mammalian females, one X chromosome out of the two would undergo random inactivation in early embryonic life, and therefore both males and females have a single active X. Lyon's hypothesis provided an improved understanding of the basic mechanisms responsible for X-linked diseases. Classically, the description of X-linked inheritance are either X-linked recessive and X-linked dominant. Dear students, let's discuss about the X-linked recessive inheritance. Generally, it manifests only in males. A male with an affected allele on his single X chromosome is hemizygous and cannot transmit the disorder to their male offsprings. But all his daughters would be obligate carriers. Healthy heterozygous carrier females pass the disorder to affected sons. So from affected males, it can be transmitted to male grandchildren through carrier daughters. The X chromosome has many genes that are important for growth and development. This type of inheritance is called crisscross inheritance. The Y chromosome is much smaller on the other hand and has fewer genes. Females having two X chromosomes, that's XX, and therefore if one of the genes on an X chromosome has a change or mutation, the normal gene on the other X chromosome can compensate for the changed copy. If this happens, the female is usually a healthy carrier of the X-linked condition. Being a carrier means that you do not have the condition but carry a changed copy of the gene. In some cases, females show mild signs of the condition. Males have an X and a Y chromosome, that's XY, and therefore if one of the genes on the male's X chromosome has a change or mutation, he does not have another copy of that gene to compensate for that changed copy. This means that he will be affected by the condition. Conditions that are inherited in this way are called X-linked recessive conditions. Some examples of X-linked conditions include hemophilia, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and fragile X syndrome. Dear students, let's now discuss about the risk calculation. The X chromosome from a male is transmitted to daughters and the Y chromosome is transmitted to sons. If an affected male has kids with a healthy female, none of his male offsprings will be affected, but all of his female offsprings will be carriers. If a carrier female has kids with a healthy male, each male offspring has a 50% chance of being affected, and female offspring have a 50% chance of being a carrier. Dear students, let's now discuss about the variable expression. Heterozygous females are those who are having mutant allele on one X chromosome and normal allele on the another X chromosome. Heterozygous female may have a variable expression of X-linked recessive disorder due to the random process of X inactivation involving inactivation of the X chromosome with a mutant allele in some cells, while inactivation of the X chromosome with a normal allele in other cells. That is called as mosaic pattern. Dear students, let's now talk about the X-linked disorders in females. Sometimes females might be affected by X-linked recessive disorders. This fact is explainable by one of the following possibilities. Dear students, let's now discuss heterozygosity. X inactivation is a random phenomena that can involve a mutant allele containing X and a normal allele X in equal proportions in the heterozygous female. It is a possibility that the active X chromosome in the majority of the cells of a heterozygous female is the one having a mutant allele, that is skewed X inactivation, leading to disorder expression. This has been the case in Duchenne muscular dystrophy and hemophilia A. Dear students, let's now discuss the homozygosity. When both X chromosomes of females have a mutant allele as reported in hemophilia A and ichthyosis. Now let's discuss about the translocations. If a female is having a translocation involving an autosome and one of the X chromosomes and the translocation disrupts a gene on an X chromosome, in that case a female might be affected. This pattern has been observed in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. a female having only a single X chromosome, that is Turner syndrome, with 45 chromosomes, which is bearing a mutant allele. Hemophilia has been reported in the girl infant with the Turner syndrome. Dear students, let's discuss about the X-linked dominant inheritance. Male and female both are affected, but females are affected in excess and less severely. Affected males can transmit the mutant allele to female offspring but not to male offspring. Affected females can transmit the mutant allele to 50% of his male offspring and 50% of his female offspring. Examples are vitamin D resistant, that is hypophosphatemic rickets, Charcot-Marie tooth disease. Some X-linked dominant disorders such as incontinentia pigmenti showed a mosaic pattern of involvement for heterozygous females. Therefore, most X-linked conditions are recessive. Very rarely X-linked conditions can be passed on in a dominant way. This means that even though a female inherits one normal copy and one changed copy of the gene, the changed gene will be enough to cause the condition. If a male inherits a changed X chromosome, then this would be enough to cause the condition because males only have one X chromosome. An affected female has a 50%, that is 1 in 2, chance of having affected children, sons and daughters. An affected male will have all daughters affected, but all sons will be unaffected. Dear students, let's now discuss about the X-linked dominant lethals. These disorders are incompatible with early embryonic survival. They are seen only in females and not in males because in the severe form they will cause the death of a male embryo, but as females are less severely affected, female embryos will survive. Dear students, let's discuss about the sex chromosomes in humans. Human X and Y chromosome determine the biological sex of a person, with XX specifying female and XY specifying male. Although the Y chromosome contains a small region of similarity to the X chromosome so that they can pair during meiosis, the Y chromosome is much shorter and contains many fewer genes. The human Y chromosome plays a key role in determining the sex of developing embryo. This is mostly due to a gene called SRY, that is sex determining region of Y chromosome. SRY is found in the Y chromosome and encodes a protein that turns on other genes required for male development. XX embryos don't have SRY, so they develop a female, whereas XY embryos do have SRY gene, so they develop as male. In rare cases, errors during meiosis may transfer SRY gene from the Y chromosome to the X chromosome. If an SRY bearing X chromosome fertilizes a normal egg, it will produce a chromosomally female, that is XX embryo, that develops as a male. If an SRY deficient Y chromosome fertilizes a normal egg, it will produce a chromosomally male embryo, that is XY, that develops as a female. Dear students, let's now discuss about the X-linked genes. When a gene is present on the X chromosome but not on the Y chromosome, it is said to be X-linked gene. X-linked genes have different inheritance patterns than genes on non-sex chromosomes, that is the autosomes. That's because these genes are present in different copy numbers in males and females. Since a female has 2 X chromosomes, she will have 2 copies of each X-linked gene. A male, on the other hand, has different genotype possibilities than a female. Since he has only 1 X chromosome paired with a Y chromosome, he will have only 1 copy of any X-linked gene. Dear students, let's now discuss about the X-linked genetic disorders. In humans, the alleles for certain conditions, including some forms of color blindness, hemophilia, and muscular dystrophy, are X-linked. These diseases are much more common in men than they are in women due to their X-linked inheritance pattern. Let's explore this using an example in which a mother is heterozygous for a disease-causing allele. Women who are heterozygous for disease alleles are said to be, and they usually don't display any symptoms themselves. Sons of these women have a 50% chance of getting the disorder, but daughters have little chance of getting the disorder unless the father also has it, and will instead have a 50% chance of being carriers. Recessive X-linked traits appear more often in males than females because if a male receives a bad allele from his mother, he has no chance of getting a good allele from his father, who provides a Y to hide the bad one. Females, on the other hand, will often receive a normal allele from their fathers, preventing the disease allele from being expressed. Dear students, the current view is as such. Many female carriers of X-linked recessive disorders demonstrate abnormal phenotype. This is due to the variable expressivity of X-linked disorders and the involvement of several mechanisms. For example, skewed X inactivation, somatic mosaicism, etc. So recently, it has been proposed that the terms dominant and recessive should be discontinued and all disorders should categorize as X-linked. Dear students, let's now discuss about some common X-linked disorders. Red-green color blindness is a common trait that affects at least 10% of men but only 1% of women. The red-green color blindness may be partial or complete, but the latter is much less common. Hemophilia A results from a mutation in the factor VIII gene. Hemophilia A may be inherited or may occur due to a spontaneous mutation. Acquired hemophilia A can occur if a patient develops antibodies to factor VIII. The primary cause of morbidity and mortality in hemophilia A is hemorrhage, which can range from mild to severe. Although rare transfusion of blood can sometimes lead to transmission of HIV and hepatitis C, this was more common in the 1980s and 90s. Duchenne muscular dystrophy is associated with a mutation in the dystrophin gene and is characterized by profound muscle weakness leading to respiratory failure and death. X-linked agammaglobulinemia results in the inability to make plasma cells and antibodies. That means there are no plasma cells secreting the antibodies. The individual develops susceptibility to a wide range of infections which can be fatal because of absence of gamma globulins. Alport syndrome is an X-linked disorder that has a heterogeneous presentation. The pathology involves the basement membrane and chiefly affects the basement membrane of the kidney in addition to the eyes and cochlea. There appears to a mutation in the type 4 collagen gene. Charcot-Marie tooth disease is the most common inherited neurologic disorder that is characterized by an inherited neuropathy in the absence of any metabolic or biochemical dysfunction. The disorder has variable penetrance and there are also reports of spontaneous mutations. The age of presentation does vary, but the onset of the disorder is usually within the first 2 decades of life. Fabry disease is an X-linked disorder that involves the lysosomes. In this disorder, there is an excessive accumulation of neutral glycosphingolipids in the vascular endothelium, smooth muscle, and epithelial cells. The continued accumulation of glycosphingolipids accounts for dysfunction in almost every organ in the body. In a young person who presents with a history of skin lesions, renal failure, stroke, or a heart attack, one must think about Fabry disease. Other less common X-linked disorders include adrenoleukodystrophy, Kawasaki syndrome, and Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. Dear students, let's understand a case study of hemophilia. Let's take an example using an X-linked human disorder, hemophilia, a recessive condition in which a person's blood does not clot properly. A person with hemophilia may have severe, even life-threatening bleeding from just a small cut or wound. Hemophilia is caused by a mutation in either of the two genes, both of which are located on the X chromosome. Both genes encode proteins that help blood clot. Since the mother is a carrier, she will pass on the hemophilia on to half of her children, both boys and girls. None of the daughters will have hemophilia, that is zero chance of the disorder. That is because in order to have the disorder, they must get an allele from both their mother and their father. There is zero chance of the daughters getting an allele from their father, so their overall chance of having hemophilia is zero. The sons, on the other hand, get a Y chromosome from their father instead of an X, so their only copy of the blood clotting gene comes from their mother. The mother is heterozygous, so half of the sons on average will get an allele and have hemophilia. Dear students, let's now talk about the cause of inheritance of X-linked recessive condition. If a female carrier has a son, she will pass on either the X chromosome with a normal gene or the X chromosome with a changed gene. Each son therefore has 50% chance 1 in 2 of inheriting the changed gene and being affected by the condition. There is also a 50% chance 1 in 2 that the son will inherit the normal gene. If this happens, he will not be affected by the condition. This chance remains the same for every son. If a female carrier has a daughter, she will pass on either the X chromosome with the normal gene or the X chromosome with the changed gene. Each daughter therefore has a 50% chance 1 in 2 of inheriting the changed gene. If this happens, the daughter will be a carrier like her mother. There is also a 50% chance 1 in 2 that the daughter will inherit the normal gene. If this happens, she will not be a carrier and will be totally unaffected by the condition. This chance remains the same for every daughter. If a male who has an X-linked condition has a daughter, he will always pass on the changed gene to her. This is because males only have one X chromosome and they always pass this on to their daughters. All his daughters will therefore be carriers. The daughters will usually not have the condition, but they are at risk of having affected sons. If a male who has an X-linked condition has a son, his son will never inherit the changed gene on the X chromosome. This is because men always pass on their Y chromosome to their sons. If they passed on their X chromosome, they would have a daughter. Dear students, let's understand the clinical significance of X-linked recessive inheritance. Some of the features are necessary to establish the clinical diagnosis. The disorder should mostly affect males. X-linked recessive disorders transmit through healthy carrier females to their son. No male-to-male transmission occurs. Dear students, let's discuss now the clinical significance of X-linked dominant inheritance. Some of the features of X-linked dominant inheritance are: both males and females are affected, and affected females are more in number than the males. Females are less severely affected. Affected males can transmit the disorder only to their daughters, while affected females can transmit the disorder to sons as well as daughters. Dear students, let's now conclude the lecture. X-linked as related to genetics refers to characteristics or traits that are influenced by genes on the X chromosome. Humans and most other mammals have two sex chromosomes, X and Y. Females have two X chromosomes in their cells, while males have one X and one Y chromosome. In the cases of an X-linked disease, it is usually males that are affected because they have a single copy of the X chromosome that carries the disease-causing mutation. In females, the presence of a second non-mutated copy may cause different, milder or no symptoms of a sex-linked disorder. The way X-linked traits or characters may manifest differently in females and males can be due to more complex phenomena such as X inactivation and exactly how copies of the X chromosome a person has. A simple rule of thumb for most X-linked conditions is that females generally have a milder version of the condition compared to the males. Dear students, it was all about today's lecture regarding X-linked polymorphism. Hope you have understood it well. See you next time with a new topic. Till then, take care and goodbye.